This is the IDP After Show.
Hello and welcome to the IDP After Show with me, Jase Abbey. It's time yet again to look at what this week's slate of games has in store for IDP fans. And as is the case every week, I am joined by one of the best and brightest minds in IDP to help me analyse and present to you guys the defensive players we think have some of the best and worst weekly matchups. Now, I've gone full circle this week as I welcome Jake Kohlhagen onto the show, who, in addition to being a bit of a legend around these parts, was also the very first person I podded with after joining the IDP show. Jake, as we were talking about off air before we jumped on, it's been far too long since we teamed up, but we're going to make up for it today, right?
Absolutely. I'm just happy to be working with another balded beauty. I think we're underrepresented here in the IDP space, so I think we can really bring some, notice and strength and equality to the bald people in IDP, and well, obviously we'll deliver some value to our listeners here for week 7.
If you can get past the shine on our heads, obviously I'm wearing a cap. Quite haven't come to terms with it yet. Then you'll find we've got some pretty interesting things to say, right?
Exactly.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing you drop some nuggets today, Jake, as we look forward to week 7, of course. But before we get into discussing specific players that we think will either deliver or disappoint, we need to touch on arguably the biggest IDP storyline from last week, and that was the brutal injury, of course, to Aidan Hutchinson. Jake, these guys already lost Marcus Davenport earlier in the year. Their only healthy edge rushers they have on the roster are unproven, to put it kindly. But this is a contending team, of course, and trade rumors are circulating, involving some pretty big names, most of whom I think are pretty unrealistic targets. But the one that does intrigue me, and who seems a bit more of a realistic option, is Haason Reddick. What do you make of that? He's obviously unhappy with the Jets. Presumably would be a little cheaper to acquire than a lot of these other guys, but they'd have to pay him, wouldn't they?
Yeah. So I mean, you're spot on. Right? I think we kind of lamented, right? Like, there's someone says Max Crosby or whatever other one win team is out there, because they think this is fantasy football, right? And they're just going to start selling off all their pieces once they feel like, they're just full tilt after a poor start. And NFL teams don't operate like that. But when you have a clear disconnect between the organization and the Jets and Haason Reddick like that we do today, this is something where I really think something can get done. The cost, I think, will be pretty minimal from draft capital standpoint. It's really going to boil down to what does their salary cap situation look like for this year and going forward, and what is that organization willing to do? They've seemed really well run up to this point. They've really built out a strong core young roster. They've paid pieces that have come up, Amon-Ra, Jared Goff. Like, they know what they want to do and they know how they want to do it. So it's really going to boil down to, I think, what those contract negotiations look like, and not having knowledge of the Lions cap off the top of my head. I could see why they would go all in on it, right? When you have a window, you do have to make that push in the NFL. Reddick would be the piece for that. I just wonder if this is going to be a situation like when Von Miller was traded to the Rams, several years back in their championship run, where he probably maybe doesn't make an IDP impact right away, for several weeks, as he's got to get back into game shape. He's got to start working in with the team. So hopefully it happens sooner rather than later, and he can be a relevant IDP piece for us for our playoff runs in fantasy. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if and what they can get done here in the coming weeks, because it sounds like the Jets are trying to put a narrow window on this as well too. I think they've offered a limited amount of time for them to go chase new offers with new agency as well for Haason Reddick. I think he's with Drew Rosenhaus now, so.
Yeah, that gives us some hope that we might see something. I think for the Jets, I understand why they'd want a short window on this. It's hanging over them. Everyone always talks a lot about the Jets, especially with Rodgers in town this year and the struggles they've had. I think this is a negative thing that they just want. They want off their back, right?
Yep, I would agree.
It goes without saying, should have said this up front, we're obviously gutted for Hutchinson. To lose a player of his quality he's almost irreplaceable, isn't he?
Clearly front runner for defensive player of the year, right? I mean, even when he wasn't making statistical plays like against the Seahawks where, he didn't record an actual sack, but if you go back and watch all of his pass rush snaps, I mean, Geno Smith was off his mark constantly just because of Aidan Hutchinson alone. And you can't replace that.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued to see how this plays out. Not necessarily about the group behind him, because I really don't think any of those guys are. I mean, none of them are proven. I mean, James Houston had a spell a couple of years back where he looked good in a really sort of small sample size, but none of these other guys are proven in any way whatsoever. And for such a good team, it'd be such a shame if they had no pass rush. They got the two guys on the interior, obviously, are pretty good, McNeil and Onwurazike, but. They need some help on that edge, I think. So let's see how it plays out. But Jake, before we go off on too much of a tangent, let's get into talking about the players who we like and dislike this week. We've got 5 linebackers, including the winner of the audience poll. We've got 4 defensive linemen and 4 defensive backs to get through. So why don't you kick us off with the linebacker you think has a chance to come up big for IDP managers this week?
Absolutely. And I think, we kick it off right here on Thursday night. I really like Cody Barton, or most notably, I really like the matchup for the Denver Broncos linebacker. So even Justin Strnad is in play as well. Ever since Alex Singleton went down, speaking of other brutal IDP injuries, Barton is clearly the full-time role, very, very respectful, 12.96% tackle rate. So, floating right around that average mark, whereas Strnad's kind of a little lower at the 11.3% tackle rate. These are still decent enough numbers when you got a really plus matchup like they do here against the Saints. They have one of the highest rush rates as well as also the lowest pass rate over expectation, right? So this just means that they're looking to run the ball as a base. And when they get into situations even where people would expect them to pass, they're still looking to run. And what would really make it harder to consider passing the ball? Not having your top 2 pass catchers in Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. And I think on a short week with a concussion for Olave, that's very likely that he misses, plus his history of concussions. And then Shaheed's, knee injury, not a lot is known yet at this point on the severity of it. But I just think, if Bub Means and Mason Tipton and Jawan Johnson are your primary guys out there, you're probably going to look at Kamara, both in the run and pass portion of your game. And at that point, I think that bodes really well for opportunities for Cody Barton and Justin Strnad to deliver a really strong tackle floor for us this week. And then you can go ahead and pair on top of that how much they get in terms of pass rush opportunities each week as well. And Spencer Rattler looking like a true rookie out there. And what's one of the biggest things we see with rookie quarterbacks? That time to process, right? So the time to actual throw and get the ball out of their hand, he's at just over 3 seconds, which I know seems minuscule in a normal life, but when you're talking about these guys playing at the speed they're talking about, 250, 300-pound linemen running you down, you got to have that ball out quickly. And 3 seconds average time to get off that's not looking good. So I think there's some strong upside in play for both Barton and Strnad this week. So I'm looking at Barton primarily, but if Strnad's out there, I think he's a really good play this Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement here, or in agreement. Sorry, I think my one bugbear with Barton, I do own him in one league, is the amount of assists. It's almost 1-to-1 with the solos, and with obviously Strnad, it's still the case that you might want to start full-time guys ahead of him. He's in that sort of 70%, 75% range. But that aside, you make a good case. It's a plus matchup for both of these guys, and so. Yeah, I'm on board. I did want to disagree because you did crap all over my waiver ad list in Tipton and Means this week, but I couldn't be that cruel, so I've let you off. So my first nomination is Quincy Williams. There's a really interesting situation playing out at the other linebacker spot between Sherwood, who's playing really well and has played really well, while Mosley's been out. And, it'd be fun to see how that one looks in week 7 once Mosley's been sort of eased back in the way that they talked about. But Williams at the other spot, he's the one constant, the every down guy. He's almost always productive. His tackle rate isn't blowing anyone away, 11.4% this season. And maybe his IDP managers have soured on him a little, but at least in those shallow leagues maybe. But yeah, he's for me a person who can get the job done in this matchup. The Steelers have allowed more tackles to opposition linebackers than any other team. So I think there could be a big game coming from Williams. The only thing that makes me pause is that I just saw that the Steelers are planning a change at quarterback. And with that change, will that mean that they'll do different things this week? Possibly. Will that affect how many tackles the linebackers can rack up? Possibly, but I'm still sticking with Williams.
No, I like it, right? He's always been a speed guy who can play sideline to sideline. And I think having Sherwood in there, right, that's kind of an overlap of their skills a bit. Sherwood being kind of one of those undersized linebacker, oversized safety. But I think this is something where as Mosley comes back in more, you're spot on. I don't like this because I'm facing Quincy Williams in a good handful of leagues this week. But I think it's a great call out.
Yeah, let's hope he can make me look good. So which linebacker are you fading this week?
Yeah, I'm probably, everyone else has already caught up to this, but Jahlani Tavai, after Bentley went down, who was, looking very strong in his own rights to start off the year for IDP. Tavai came in, Raekwon McMillan stepped up, and just absolutely inefficient as a tackler, right? And when we look at our linebackers, that's what we're looking for. We want someone who can deliver us a solid floor with some good upside. And I don't know that Tavai has either of this for us anymore. And I think the coaching staff is starting to realize this too, right? So Tavai's at just under 10% tackle rate, very, very poor. I mean, he's hovering around what we see for safety numbers in terms of tackle percentage. And the real kicker is he's got a near 20% missed tackle rate on the season. So you're talking about 1 out of every 5 opportunities he has a chance to score you points, he is absolutely missing. And as I said, I think the Patriots coaching staff is realizing this, and we're seeing these snaps come down and down. You're seeing more of a rotation. I almost said Christian Ellis. Man, talk about a family bloodline there too. Caden Ellis, Christian Ellis, Jonah Ellis. I think there's a 4th one too in the NFL. I'm blanking on, but anyways, now they got to go to London. They got to face a Jaguars team who have struggled to sustain drives. They have the 5th worst third down percentage, 3rd fewest plays ran. I think, ETN's probably likely to miss and not be consistent in that game plan. Duggar and Marte Mapu have really stepped up as well, too, in terms of playing more inside the box and just basically being that off-ball linebacker that they need them to be, because they're just not getting it out of Tavai. They're not getting it out of McMillan ever since Bentley has departed, unfortunately, due to injuries. So, with that said, there's even a little bit of hope that the Patriots offense might start to sustain some more drives and kind of take a little bit away from the opportunities there with what he's done to try to revitalize that offense here, given a 1-game sample size. So all those things said, Tavai to me is an absolute bench, and probably should be looking for other options overall in your roster.
Yeah, and the Patriots should be as well, and they are. As you said, his role has been diminishing every week for the last 4 weeks, ever since he took over for Bentley, in fact. And I've got a bit of egg on my face with this one. I was encouraged by what Tavai had done in the last 2 years. I thought he'd improved quite significantly as a player from the guy that I knew in his early years, because I used to hate him as a player back then. I used to crap on him all the time whenever I talk about him. And earlier this season, after Bentley went down, I was like, oh, maybe this is his opportunity to step up and kind of show what he can do in a full-time role. That full-time role that's kind of been evading him in recent years because of Bentley. And yeah, the results have not been pretty at all. Like you say, really poor missed tackle rate, really poor in coverage. There's really nothing that he's done well with this opportunity. And I think, the Patriots are sitting up and taking notice, and that's why his role is starting to drop off a little bit. So yeah, he's an easy fade for me. So my next guy is in this spot. I was thinking about doubling up on Jets players and choosing CJ Mosley here, because obviously, as I said earlier on, his role wasn't quite where we'd want it to be in his first game back. But, they did talk about easing him back in again. So I've kind of shied away from mentioning a guy who will play more this week. And instead, I've pivoted to Daiyan Henley. And this one is a shame, because he's, in my opinion, the Chargers' best linebacker right now. But linebacker production, as we know, Jake, is so closely linked to snap volume. And sadly, Henley's snap share took a nosedive this week. He was on the field for 90%, 100% of the snaps between weeks 2 and 4. And against the Broncos last week, it was only 76%. That, of course, was because Coulson came back from injury. And, despite Colson's struggles last week, my concern is that we're going to continue to see this 3-man rotation that the Chargers talked about wanting to use to keep their linebackers fresh even before the season started. So, yeah, even with only 2 teams on a bye, managers, I think, should have better options than the guy who's playing 3/4 of the snaps. Simple as that. Anything you want to add on this one, Jake?
No, I mean, it's disappointing, right? Because I don't know, me personally, my eye test, I haven't dug into the numbers, but Perryman just kind of looks meh out there. And Colson obviously, has the draft capital. He has the tie to Harbaugh and the coaching staff. So I would love to just see them just run 2 guys out there, even if it was 90% plus, and then they'd Perryman sprinkled in a little bit, maybe on really certain run fit type downs. But gosh, yeah, it stinks. I was excited about Henley. I was excited about Colson, and we just haven't gotten a chance to fully, a little bit of a chance to fully realize it with Henley here. But yeah, it's sad overall.
It is because, as things stand, none of them are startable really outside the deeper leagues. Henley still is, I think, in those really deep leagues, maybe as an LB4 or even an LB3 on those weeks where we've got multiple teams on buys. Right. But as things stand, we've kind of lost a starting linebacker because of Colson's return to the lineup. And yeah, hopefully later in the season we start to see Perriman's snap share fade away because he is the most limited of the 3 players. I think Colson's got bags of potential, but people sometimes forget that he was a 3rd round pick, and Henley was as well. Henley's more of a project, but I've been impressed by how he's come along. So for me, it's disappointing that he's dropped down the rankings a little bit on a weekly basis. It is what it is. Yep. We kind of knew this might happen when Colson came back, so hopefully IDP managers have prepared. So, Jake, let's talk about defensive linemen. Let's switch positions here. Who do you think is going to deliver big this week?
Yeah, so for this one, got another little 2-pack here. Starting Greg Rousseau. Obviously, everyone I think remembers his huge Week 1 performance. How can you forget 3 sacks and a week-winning upside type play there? But I also like AJ Epenesa, and some of this is what they've been able to do on the field, especially for Rousseau, but also the Titans are a pretty plus matchup as well when it comes to that defensive front. So, when you just look at the breakdown of the players, Rousseau, 21 pressures, an 18% win rate overall, and a 22.4 win on pass rush sets. That's really, really strong numbers that we love to see overall, just for any DL we want to be putting out there week in and week out. AJ, not as efficient, only 9 pressures, 7.5% win rate, but 13.3 on the pass rush set. So he's got a clear ability to win better on those pass rush opportunities at this point. Novon Miller as well, in terms of, the rotation that they like to run out there. So the snaps have been, seeing a nice little uptick for both of these guys. But that Titans offensive line overall, man, they're allowing a pressure about 1 out of every 3 dropbacks that they run out there. And generally they're in situations where the game script is not a neutral or positive one for them either. So what does that leave them to be doing? Passing. And then obvious passing downs. That's where both of these guys have shown the ability to succeed really, really well. Obviously Rousseau even more so. Epenesa though. And I should say these numbers are sans the effort from last night too, right? So I think he notched 2 more sacks last night, AJ did. So I don't know what his pressure rate and all that kind of rolls into there, but still, again, very average numbers for AJ, but a very plus matchup overall. Opportunity looks great. So I think if you're looking for someone in a little bit of a deeper DL3 range, Epenesa is great. And obviously Rousseau, you're firing her up and you're hoping for big things this week.
Yeah, I like both guys. Both are good players. Talked up Rousseau before. Still expect this to be, maybe his best season. Epenesa's the kind of guy that I never start with on my roster in the more shallow leagues, perhaps, and then always end up picking up and then never dropping again for the whole of the rest of the season before I then drop him at the end of the season to get down to certain roster numbers, and then I go through the same cycle next year and the same cycle the year after. So maybe one of these years I'll trust what he's able to do when he plays and just keep him sticking around. But yeah, the Titans OL, they started the year really badly, got a little better in recent games I think, but against the likes of Rousseau and Epenesa in the kind of form they've been in early in the season, I don't fancy the Titans' chances. So yeah, I agree with you on this one too.
Yeah, I mean the Colts with even a banged up offense or defensive line, right? They still generated 9 pressures against the Titans on 30 dropbacks this last week, and I mean they still have some good pass rushers out there. The Colts do, but I mean it's obviously not what it was to start the year. And yeah, I mean the talent that these two have, I think, again, it should be a good week for both of them.
Yeah, and it feels like I've been suggesting people start opposition pass rushes against the Titans for a number of years now. They were definitely one of the plus matchups for defensive linemen and edge rushers last year. I know it's really hard to fix an O-line in the space of a year or even two, but this is something they need to focus on. I think Levis is kind of struggling back there. So my guy, this one kind of intrigues me this week, is Jonathon Cooper, Jake, and he's playing pretty well, and he's been productive, right? 24 pressures, 5 sacks, 14% pressure rates, pretty nice. He's hovering around sort of 80% of the snaps as well, which is really good, really healthy for an edge rusher. And this week, the reason I nominate him really is because he's got a sneaky good matchup against the Saints. Spencer Rattler struggled against the Bucs last week in his first start, and that O-line really didn't do him any favors. He was pressured 18 times, allowed 5 sacks against the team that until that point had kind of struggled to get after the QB. So I think Thursday night football, bright lights, big game, second start. I think Rattler's going to get rattled. So I'm predicting Cooper. Sorry about that. Cooper, possibly Benito, possibly Zach Allen. All of them could make a statement, I think. What do you think on this one, Jake?
I mean, you're spot on, right? I talked about Rattler being a rookie, his inability to process the defense, hold on to the ball too long. I mean, that's a plus for, even mid-tier type rushers. But Cooper, like you said, has been playing really at another level. And yeah, it should be a smash one there. So it seems like we're really just kind of going to pick on the Saints here this week. And I think that's what happens when you have a rookie quarterback.
It happens, and I want to be clear. I kind of like Spencer Rattler as a player. I think maybe in time, I think he should have been drafted higher than he was, and maybe in time he'll become that guy. This is a great opportunity for him. It's just that he's not as good as Derek Carr at sensing pressure and getting rid of the ball before that pressure lands. So for that reason, yeah, 2 games in, it's a tough ask to go out and play well on Thursday night football. The pressure must be intense. Like I couldn't even begin to imagine.
Right.
So, which defensive lineman do you think could disappoint this week, and why?
Yep, and I love that you use the word disappoint too, because who I got here from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, YaYa Diaby, is someone who's actually been playing very, very well this year, right? He's someone that I think the guys here at the IDP show have been on to him, prior to his strong performances already this year. That said, it's just a very, very, negative matchup in my mind against the Baltimore Ravens. When you look at what YaYa Diaby's done, he's been delivering pressures. He's been able to convert some of that. He's even done well in some of those run type fits where, playing the edge and reading RPOs and making some plays. I just think when you get into a situation where you're playing against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, this is a situation where a lot of defenses have struggled, especially edges, to deliver us some really great IDP performances. So this isn't something where I'm telling us to get away from YaYa. Maybe you can still plug him in that, low DL2, DL3 type range. If you really need to, definitely keep him on your roster. Better weeks will be coming, in my opinion. But when you look at what Lamar Jackson and that offensive line done, they turned it around from week 1. They found a way to, build around Lamar and Henry in the backfield, but still attack, in the passing game a little bit downfield. And they do it while only allowing 24% pressure rate, which is, I think third best or fourth best. I forgot to write it down here. But also only 9% of that is converted into a sack, which is one of the league's best as well. Obvious Lamar's ability to escape, extend plays, get out. We saw him stiff arm Sam Hubbard into the ground on that amazing play just a few weeks ago. So I love YaYa. Better weeks are coming. This is a down one. Manage expectations.
Yeah, I was getting ready to disagree with you. I knew you were going to choose. You mentioned you were going to choose Diaby, and I was going to talk about some of the underlying metrics which give me reason to really like what he's doing. He's something like top 10 in win rate, top 5, I think, in pressure rate at the position, and he's just been really unfortunate to not have more sacks. I think he's got exactly the same number of pressures this season as he had last season. And last season he ended up with like 9 sacks, and this season so far he's only got the 1. And we know, those sack rates do they change wildly over time, and even game to game, season to season, they vary massively. And we know that he'll catch up at some point if he continues to play as he has and to be as disruptive as he has. But like you say, there's no getting away from the fact that this is a bad matchup. Talks about pass rushers going up against the Ravens in previous weeks and made similar points to the one you just made there. Lamar, even if you can get past his O-line, and yes, that right-hand side of the O-line is a little weaker, and I know Diaby does move from left to the right edge as well, so maybe when he is going up against that right tackle, he has a chance to do something, but you wouldn't bet on it. It's a bad matchup.
Yep. Right. I mean, that's all this is, right? What's the median outcome we expect here? Can Diaby do something great? Absolutely, because you just talked about it. The guy is having a stellar year, and he's going to do amazing things. And to me, fantasy football is a game of numbers, and we're just trying to predict the most likely outcome. And to me, that's one where he has a very meh game.
That's it. He is, I will say, the kind of guy that I'm going out to trade for right now. And you could possibly even wait one more week, because as we talked about here, we're expecting him to have a quiet game, and maybe his managers are sitting out there thinking, 1 sack in 6 games after this weekend, maybe 1 sack in 7 games. This guy isn't living up to the kind of potential he showed last year. But if you do that, then just know I'll be there waiting to give up whatever's needed in a trade to get hold of him, and I'll reap the rewards as the season unfolds. So, yeah. I like this nomination, Jake. I was expecting to disagree with you, but yeah, in your comments, you've clearly stolen my points and stolen my thunder. So thank you for that. With my nomination, and I will say it's pretty dangerous to bet against a guy like this who's been as productive as this. But I'm going to go with Harold Landry, and it's similar reasons to your sort of process there, Jake. It's the matchup, right? The Titans face the Bills this week. Josh Allen rarely takes a lot of sacks. He's been sacked only, I think, 8 times in 6 games this year. And it was a similar story last year, right? This is no short-term fluke. He was sacked only 26 times last year. Landry will see a lot of Spencer Brown this weekend, and Brown isn't anything special at all. But even so, I just think Landry will be hard pushed to add to his sack numbers against a team who I think will be playing with a lead as well and running the ball a ton, as usual. I will say, Landry can produce good tackle volume, so there is that, and he has a chance to do that here, but it's just not enough of an incentive for me to change my mind. So, interested in your thoughts, Jake. Am I being silly for writing off one of the most consistently productive players out there at this position, or like me, do you hate this matchup against the Bills?
No, you're spot on, right? I mean, there's legitimately 3 quarterbacks when I look at this that I always struggle to get excited about an edge matchup for them, right? And we've already talked about 2 of them, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and the third one's Patrick Mahomes. They just have such strong pocket presence. Obviously, Lamar and Josh Allen have elite level athleticism in different ways, but Mahomes is up there as well. But those are ones that I always struggle to have high expectations. Again, I'll still play star players against them, or second tier players, because things can happen, right? But it's all about managing expectations and realizing what's on the other side of the field, right? Defensive football and by nature, the IDP is very reactionary, right? What is the offense going to do, and how does the defense respond to that? And that's exactly what happens, right? When Lamar's out there and he starts scrambling all over the place, when Josh Allen he did it last night. He ran right at an edge defender, ducked under him somehow, under his arm tackle, and rolled out to the left and threw a touchdown to Dawson Knox. Like any other quarterback, that's a sack, right? But that's just the kind of stuff you have to be aware of and kind of put together to have the full picture and understand why a decision like this is actually probably the right call, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah. I watched him go out and put up like 3 sacks and make me look completely stupid now. It happens. It's happened before. It'll happen again. I'm actually not, I will say, I'm not Landry's biggest fan, and I understand that he continually proves me wrong. For me, he was that kind of guy that just needed a lot of volume to produce, but you can't argue with the sack numbers. He's been so productive for so many years now, and he has a chance this weekend, but it's not his best matchup. That's what I'm getting at, really. And it sounds like you're on the you agree with me on that one, I think. So, ready to talk some DBs, Jake?
I think so.
Right. Who do you like in the DB spot for week 7?
Yeah, so someone who kind of flew under the radar a lot for me, but is really, I think, showing out really nicely here, DeShon Elliott of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So his snap percentage fluctuated a little bit at the start of the year, but he's really locked it in here, and we're seeing him float around 85% pretty consistently now, and he just logged 100% snaps as well just last week. And along with that, he's been averaging 9 tackles per game. Part of that has to do with he has really, really great alignment. He's taking 108 snaps inside the box and 107 of them in the slot out of his 322 so far this season. But he's also been really, really great at the opportunities he's had. He's missed 0 tackles on the season so far. Now, all that said, obviously the case for negative regression is very, very possible. However, sometimes when outliers exist, we just need to get onto that, and we need to ride along with it as it's happening. And I think this could be absolutely one of those cases where Elliott's just found his niche in this defense. He's delivering. He's playing at a good level. We're not seeing a whole lot from the linebacker spots, although Queen has played a little bit better here the last couple of weeks. But I think this is just something where he's got a strong presence in this defense, and he's got a nose for the ball too. I think we've seen him with a couple fumble recoveries, maybe one. I'm blanking here, but I know he's got at least one, maybe 2. A couple pass breakups. I like Elliott for us this week. Alignment's great, strong utilization. I like him going forward beyond this week as well.
Yeah, no arguments there from me, Jake. He's been, one of the better, probably waiver wire pickups at DB. I think this season he, for me, was always a decent safety, but he's been playing at least in some games out of his skin for the Steelers, and I've been really impressed. Like you say, this just seems like a really good fit for him, I guess. I know that Casey missed a bit of time last week, which may have been the reason why Elliott did play every down, and Casey's questionable to return, I think, for week 7. So there is a chance that Elliott loses a little bit of his role there, but it's not enough to change how we feel, I think, about Elliott. I've been really impressed with him so far, and I like this call.
Yeah.
So my guy is, and it's not a sexy pick, but I'm going to go with Xavier Woods. I've kind of chosen him for a few different reasons, Jake. And, consistent performers are hard to find at the DB spot. You mentioned one just there with DeShon Elliott. I think Woods has been another this year. 7 tackles or more in 4 of his 6 games. Part of the reason for that, I think, is because he's playing nearer the line of scrimmage in the box more than he did last season. Anyway, his matchup this week is also pretty nice. I think the Commanders have been a favorable matchup for opposition safeties. Not so much last week, but they still rank top 10 in tackles allowed to opposition safeties. And I think with the way that Daniels is playing, converted third downs at and look this up, the second highest rate in the NFL right now, I think this Panthers D might be on the field quite a lot this week. And obviously that helps Woods' outlook as well to rack up tackles and any other plays that come his way. So, like I say, not the most fun of picks, Jake, not the sexiest of picks. This is often the case with DBs, but are you on board with this one?
Oh, absolutely. Xavier Woods has shown us, I think, year in and year out that sometimes the best ability is availability. This guy is just always out there. He's always logging snaps. He does a great job of not being on the opposite end of highlight plays too, right? Like, I think he's a consistent guy. That's the way you described it. And I think that's the perfect word for him. We've just been able to see that become a greater IDP reality for us in the sense, right? A little bit better floor for us, or higher floor overall. So yeah, and it's definitely a plus matchup. I agree. So Xavier Woods should be in all of our lineups this week where possible.
Yeah, and he's another guy for me. He's kind of one of those players that people would have added from waivers because his tackle efficiency, his tackle volume last year wasn't great. It looked like it was dropping off, and he's getting a little older, and the shine's kind of come off his name a little bit. He's got a cool name, but he's not really producing the plays or the volume that we want. But this year it's been different. Like I say, he's been playing down in the box much more than he did last year, and that seems to have had a a positive result. So yeah, I like him. So which DBs do you not like?
Yeah, so again here, kind of going with the team approach. To me, it's really the 49ers safeties and whomever comes out of that bunch healthy come game time as well, right? I know Ji'Ayir Brown, Talanoa Hufanga's been banged up and then dealing with injuries in game. Mustafa went out there, had a pick, looked all right, and then he went out, and then George Odum stepped in. So if any of these guys end up on your roster this week and they're starting to sniff your starting lineup, I would start to look other ways. Primarily when you look at the matchup they have against the Chiefs love to work short and to intermediate almost exclusively. So, and when you look at how the 49ers safeties alignment sit, they don't tend to bring them down. They have had really strong linebacker play. They obviously have Fred Warner there still. Campbell's been very meh at best so far this year. But that with that said, they're sitting back in those cover two shells or quarters or whatever defense, essentially those, prevent type defenses. And the Chiefs just aren't going to attack that consistently. Mahomes only has 8 passes of 20 plus air yards on the year, which when I started just filtering down initially, right, I was like, oh, I'll do 10. And I was like, where's Patrick Mahomes in this list even? And he just doesn't throw deep. Okay, well, then we get into the intermediate. He's like, oh, well, he's got 30 pass attempts. Is that okay? Well, that's 20th in the league out of all quarterbacks, right? Just in terms of sheer volume. So they're not going to do that. They obviously have a penchant to run the ball, even after they bring in the corpse of Kareem Hunt. And he comes out there and looks, valuable again to us from a fantasy standpoint. Kansas City just is not going to engage the safeties regularly and consistently here. Maybe if somehow they make a decision to match up one of them against Kelsey, but again, you have one of the best, if not the best coverage linebacker in Fred Warner out there. I just don't see them pulling them down to make that type of decision here in their game plan, because they haven't done it yet to this year. So to me, I just don't love the alignment. I don't love the matchup. I'm pivoting away from any 49er safety that I have this week.
Yep. No argument from me. I've not been excited about any of these players this year. The injuries, like you say, haven't helped. Division of duties, maybe behind Brown, doesn't really excite me either. Not when there's so many DBs out there who are playing every down. And yeah, like you say, the alignment's not great. Brown maybe slightly more of a box guy than the others, but even that's just not netted as any positive results. So let me put you on the spot though, Jake. If you were going to choose one of those 49ers safeties to start, and I guess Hufanga's out of the equation after his injury, but who would you go with, if any?
It's Brown pretty easily, and to me, that's the talent, the youth, right? I think Penn State, if I'm recalling correctly, when he came out, I love the way he attacked downhill, and so if all of a sudden something kicked in alignment-wise or game plan-wise, and he could do that, that would be the guy I'd be targeting. Yeah, it's pretty easy. I know Odum had a couple of plays when he came in as well after Mustafa went out this last week, but just nothing on the eye test for me that made me excited about this guy. Yeah.
And I just want to touch on briefly, another tangent, but Hufanga, I know that he struggled with injuries, but there's probably no better example of why we don't really value safeties as high as we used to. We see these guys pop up every now and again, play really well. He was like a big play machine, but it was like 2 years ago now, wasn't it? Yep. It seems like a long, long time ago.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and you look at when they did that, he had, better alignment in a lot of the games that he would score well, right? Or it was very big play dependent, defensive touchdown type of things where, it's great when you get that in a week, it's week winning, but to think that that's the type of thing you can account for going forward, that's just a fool's errand right there.
Yeah, I mean, he's still young. He's still got plenty of career left ahead of him, and hopefully he can kind of bounce back and become that impact player that he once was. But the further we get from when he was that guy, it's not good. So look, let's pivot to the defensive back that I am fading this week, and this one is going to raise some eyebrows, Jake, on the back of his performance last week. Huge game. I've gone with Tykee Smith, and I know people might think I've lost the plot. He's looked excellent. He hasn't just been producing big plays. He's just been playing really well as well, and that gives me some level of confidence that maybe his role will increase going forward. But he is the designated slot DB for now and has been pretty much all season. And while that helps, I think his chances of producing good tackle efficiency, good tackle numbers relative to other DBs, it also means that he comes off the field more than we would like. Like I say, that could change going forward, but for now, that's where we're at. And unless I see things change, I'm not going to change my opinion. So I was kind of surprised, given how he appeared to be everywhere last week, that he only played 60% of the snaps. I know he wasn't every down guy, but I was surprised that he only played 60%. Could that change against the Ravens? Possibly. As I say, I think he's deserving, but it's a gamble. And I don't know, call me really clever or not, but I think Lamar and co will be a bit more careful with the ball than Rattler was last week. So yeah, Jake, am I being stupid to bet against one of the most informed DBs right now, or does that fact that he's not playing, 40% of the snaps every week kind of concern you too?
Yeah, I think you nailed it perfectly there when you look at the fluctuation in the snap percentage, right? 2 weeks ago, I think he had 10 tackles, like 9 solo. They were playing the Atlanta Falcons, one of the highest 11 personnel grouping use teams out there, right? So if they're going to have 3 wide receivers out there, it only makes sense that you're going to have 3 defensive backs out there. And guess what? He played a ton of snaps. He made a bunch of plays, and he was great. I think you said this last week. Now his snaps were down. He still found a way to make some amazing plays out there. But now come in the Ravens, a team that likes to use multiple tight ends. Is this something where all of a sudden they're going to say, hey, we want Tykee Smith out here matched up against some of these tight ends? Maybe, maybe not. I don't have enough confidence to say that is the case for sure. And that lack of confidence would definitely, limit me from wanting to put him in my lineup this week. Now, perhaps we're just seeing a glimpse of what he can be. And this is someone that you should be, like you talked about, right? I love that you talked about a trade for potential with YaYa Diaby. Here's another Buccaneer that maybe after a down week here, this is a guy you could stash on a bench somewhere if someone, or, look for waiver wires as people try to cut him because they're like, well, now he's nothing, right? Or whatever it is. And look for it because we clearly have a playmaker in Tykee Smith. I know Addy loved this guy coming out. He definitely has, I think, that potential, but we just need to have a clear runway for him, like you said, where we can see this guy in 90, 95, 100% of the time. And then we really got something to work with.
Yeah, that's right. I can understand why Addy would like him. He was he's a big play specialist in college as well. And that's it's really nice to see that crossover into the NFL. And like I said, he deserves a bigger role, but where do you put him? Do you take Jordan Whitehead off the field and replace him with Tykee Smith when they're not in nickel formation? I don't know. I think Tykee Smith is a better DB than Jordan Whitehead, and obviously Winfield's going nowhere as arguably the league's best safety, so you're not going to take him off anywhere. And then I don't know, it's tough. And I will say in that game when he had those 9 tackles, he did play almost every down. But last week, even without a player whose name I forget, Itzian, Smith was back to 60%. So that concerns me, and it sounds like I'd probably get too invested in snap share. I do, but it's for good reason. If players aren't out there, they can't produce volume, and we might see these spike weeks where they go against the grain and still have huge weeks despite the fact they're not playing every down or close to every down. But yeah, by and large, over the course of his season, we'll see that stuff even out.
Agreed.
So good stuff, Jake. It's time to talk polls. So Payton Wilson smashed everybody else in the poll this week. 50% of the votes on Twitter. A lot of people are worried about Patrick Queen's slow start to the season, Jake, but he's been more productive since. Payton Wilson's kind of emerged in the last 2 games, 15 tackles over that span. What do you make of him in his week 7 outlook?
Yeah, for me, it's still, like we just talked about with Tykee Smith, right? It's the utilization that's still a struggle for me. I think that, he's shown what he can be, and I think the trajectory for him should be nothing but upward at this point. However, this is something where I don't want to buy too much into the hype just yet. Maybe maybe this is the time to go buy him before something happens and he carves out a larger role. But the Steelers still seem to have a strong affinity for rolling the Landon Roberts out there. And Roberts has shown, some big play, right? I mean, obviously the primetime game 2 weeks ago, he just launched himself over the pile perfectly to cause the fumble. And, really, I mean, I guess the Steelers still lost, but obviously that was a big impact play at the time. And that's just what he does. He makes plays in the backfield against the run. Wilson has the skill set to do everything, though, right? He can be out there 100% of the time. We've already seen some brutal injuries. I hope none happen for the Steelers, but this is a guy you should have in case of that. Maybe they just finally see what they have, and he replaces a Landon Roberts more fully, and except in those goal line type situations. I mean, that's really the hope. The talent is clearly there. I think it's going to be a bit of a trudge to get us to a point where we're like, hey, this is a guy who's, LB2 upside every week versus he's more situational at this point.
Yep. Yeah, this is, it's just very much a case of, it's cool to get excited. We're right there with you, but there's no way in hell I'm starting a guy whose role is as small as it is, right? It's almost impossible for these guys to be productive on a consistent basis when they're playing such a small role. And it's not growing either, his role. It was 43% in week 1. It was 43% last week. And really, it's not what we want as IDP managers, because we can't start either Roberts or Wilson right now, but they're using them in the way they should be using them, right? Roberts is a good run defender, and Wilson probably is better in coverage and will certainly continue to get better in coverage as well. So, yeah, they're using them how they should be used. It just doesn't seem to really, it doesn't vibe with what I want as an IDP manager, and that hurts, but it is what it is. So, one to watch, really, Wilson for now. Stash him, don't start him, see how things unfold over the course of the season, but don't be surprised if things don't change, unless, like you say, Jake, an injury happens to befall one of those two guys alongside or ahead of him.
Yep.
All right, Jake, that actually is it for today. You've been every bit as good as I knew you would be. Thanks for coming on and doing your thing. Tell our audience where they can go and find you and your content, if you please.
Absolutely. So you can obviously find me on Twitter or X. My handle is @LateRoundDB. Feel free to reach out to me. Love answering questions on there if people ever have them. Love just talking ball too. That said, most of my work, actually all my work now falls here with the IDP team. And I think we do a little bit of start sits Sunday morning at 9 a.m. So I'm kind of in and out on that group, rotating through. Love talking ball there every week with everyone and tilting through our lineup decisions each week as we try to figure that out. And otherwise just kind of filling in spots here as we go through it. Like we said, we were talking earlier before the show, life happens fast and it's happening very fast on this side. So a little bit limited in what I've put out here so far this year.
Well, we're grateful for whatever we can get from you, Jake. You, as I say, you smashed it today. Thanks to everyone else as well who took the time to check us out, whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or watching us on YouTube. I hope you found what we had to say, or at least what Jake had to say, useful in some small way. If that was the case, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know how you think we're doing. Be kind. In the meantime, I hope the fantasy gods are kind to you in week 7, and I'll see you again next week. Bye for now.
This was the IDP After Show.